Welcome to the Humanist podcast. I'm your host, Ken Stearns. Join us on a journey where we unravel the intricacies of workplace dynamics. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Humanist podcast. I'm your host, Ken, as the little intro says. The beautiful Wednesday morning here in Los Angeles, where I happen to be today. As I kind of been traveling around the country, we talk a little bit about what is it like to, in the pursuit of flourishing from a humanist standpoint. And flourishing really is just like it sounds, like a flower, like a garden, where you walk out and everything's really in full bloom. And that means it's got good soil, it's got good water, it's got good sunshine, and people really aren't much different to find that kind of flourishing spot. And, it is those components that we look for in life so we can really, flourish as people. And again, this is a holistic kind of view of kind of that pursuit of what that looks like. And I was just chatting with our next guest, Bill Colone. Bill, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ken. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for taking time out of your busy day. Just talking to you, Bill, a little bit. Sounds like you might be you might be a kind of a flourishing kind of guy. I think you're at a pretty sweet spot in life.
Yeah, things are going great. Super busy, but I like to keep it that way.
Yeah, as you said, you've got that drive to do something and be somewhere and talk to somebody, make things happen. So we'll get into a little bit more about Bill, but I want to open up with my usual. This new, it's not usual for me. I still forget to grab the jar every guest. It seems get reminded yesterday. So I reach into the jar, pull out a question. This is from my traveling podcast called The Jar. These are 444 questions about life. And so I'll do my first one, and then we'll grab one for Bill in about 20 minutes or so. Stick around for that part and see, watch Bill struggle with whatever question we end up giving him. So my question is, do you always treat people the way you want to be treated? Love this one. That's interesting because this one is always, I have a lot of fond memories of people answering that on The Jar. And when we read it, it's the obvious one. Of course, we always want to treat people the way we like to be treated, but there are those moments where, in some of my human interactions, I reflect on how I presented myself, and maybe not the best version of myself at times, but for sure that is a goal in life. So, Bill, CEO of Single Pass. Amongst other companies. Maybe we'll talk about some of those as well, but maybe tell the audience a little bit about Single Pass, because it's a really interesting product, and maybe just bring us up to speed on what you're doing and where you're at.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, 3 years ago, I was introduced to a couple of interventional radiologists who worked at a liver transplant center in Phoenix. So they do a lot of biopsy procedures every day, mostly pulling tissue out of you to check. Most of the time, they're worried because you potentially have cancer.
Okay.
So to do that, they poke a large hollow needle in you, steer it under ultrasound guidance to the tissue target. Could be kidney, liver, lung, breast. They go through the hollow needle and rip out a tissue sample that they give to the pathologist, so they can check to see if indeed do you have cancer or some other disease.
Okay.
And typically right now, there's nothing they can do to prevent bleeding that's caused by damaging the tissues of the biopsy needle and the tissue extractor. So they literally will just use a syringe and try to shoot some kind of hemostatic agent into the channel, or they literally just pull the needle out and put pressure on. And then they monitor you for several hours to make sure you're not bleeding.
Whoa.
And send you home. So typically after a biopsy procedure, you're expected to hang around anywhere from 4 to 8 hours just to make sure you're not bleeding before you go home.
Yeah, sure.
And so these doctors said, it'd be great if we knew we could prevent or stop bleeding and not have to, first of all, hold these people so long. And second of all, when they do have problems from bleeding, sometimes it's another invasive procedure to stop the bleeding.
I would imagine.
So they invented a very clever electrocautery device that has a really cool design that has just two AA batteries in the handle. And those batteries send current to this tip of a probe that goes through the guide needle. And so when the guide needle is removed or pulled out, we just essentially heat seal or cauterize all the tissue that's damaged by the biopsy tools.
Very interesting. I mean, first off, the first procedure sounds absolutely barbaric. I mean,
Yeah.
it, the way you described it, it sounds rough, right? They stick a pretty big needle in there, they pull out a sample, and then kind of hope and pray.
Yeah, it is interesting that you say that, that phrase pull and pray, because that's literally what they do. And when we did our clinical study, I was in several of the procedures, and of course the patients are already very anxious because you're not there unless they're suspecting something's wrong to begin
Yeah,
with.
yeah.
And then they're telling you, hey, in addition to this, you might have a bleeding issue. So you may have to stay here for 6 or 8 hours, and so you have anxiety the whole time while you're waiting.
Oh God.
And what we saw when we did our clinical study, they immediately could confirm with ultrasound, we know for certain you're not bleeding, so you can go home soon. So they still have the anxiety of the pathology results, but at least
Yes.
there's concern over bleeding or hanging around the hospital all day. That's removed. So there is kind of a human element to it, in that we reduce anxiety for the
Oh
physicians
God. Yeah. For
who
both
don't have to
sides,
worry
right?
about fixing the patients, and of course the patients. So it's been great thus far.
That is, you said the anxiety, my anxiety level, you would already be so nervous going in, and then to hear what's going to happen, how they take the biopsy. Yeah, that would definitely make me a little bit nervous. Tell it- Share with the audience. It's kind of interesting. The story we chatted before we started. I think it's very fascinating to me, that how you found the company and how, what your kind of your day-to-day life is.
Yeah, I've been doing this. So actually, June will be 42 years that I've been a device developer. I have a degree
Whoa.
in engineering, and I've always developed products for mostly vascular surgeons and interventional radiologists and interventional cardiologists. So some of the physicians I've worked with in the past, if they hear of new ideas from their physician friends, they introduce them to me. And that's how I met these two physicians in Phoenix. And because of a hand surgeon that I worked with years ago, we sold his idea. So now he tells his friends about me. So frequently I get outreach from introductions from people I've worked with in the past. So that's how I met those folks. And this was one idea that I thought was clever. So we co-founded a
Yeah.
company with them and raised funding. And now we have regulatory approval in Europe, and soon we'll have regulatory approval in the US.
Tell me a little bit. Share again this piece. I think it's kind of fascinating to me. Is you'll get and share what you can, your secret sauce, your formula, because you're going to get a lot of physicians who think they are saving the world, and they have
Yeah.
this great new idea, um, and they're coming to you with a hope and a prayer.
Yeah. It's very interesting because uh, almost every physician has an idea.
Yes.
And it's interesting. Sometimes they come to me where they've already spent several $100,000 of their own money.
Wow.
They filed a bunch of patents. They've tried to make prototypes,
Okay.
or to the folks who literally, other than making a drawing on a piece of paper. So that and everything in between. But it's the same evaluation every time. Is there a large market with a clear unmet need? Do they offer a solution? Can you get patent protection and make sure you don't
Yeah.
infringe anyone else's patents? And can you clinically build it? Some of the ideas are so, you can draw a lot of things on paper, but it doesn't mean you can technically achieve it. So, but it's the
Yes.
same evaluation every time. And once I find things that meet all those criteria, I also need to have some level of expertise. I don't do anything with drugs or certain devices, but if I feel
Mm,
like I have some level of expertise, we'll co-found a company. I'll go raise the money. We'll use mostly contractors to do design and development.
okay.
We'll get regulatory approvals, and once we get that far, then we sell the company to a larger company.
Where do you go to find someone to build something like that device you've got now, right? The
Oh gosh.
the the single pass, because I mean, because it looks like something that's made in China, right? It looks like something I'd see on late
Mhm.
night TV, but
Yeah, no, this,
obviously, but obviously it's not.
yeah,
So how do you? Yeah, hold it up again. I think it's kind of fast. It's kind of cool.
yeah.
How,
I
where
mean,
where
this
do you
is
find someone to make that?
Well, Orange County, California, we have over 58,000 medical device employees.
Wow.
So I'm
Okay.
in.
Okay.
So the talent is here, the contractors are here, the vendors are here. We are in medical device heaven here, and
Oh,
just from the years of experience. So depending on the device, I know there are different companies that
yeah.
specialize.
Yeah.
There are catheter-based companies and implant-based companies.
Okay.
So I have
Okay.
relationships with quite a few of the companies, and this one, I had a relationship with a contract manufacturing company here in Orange County, and I just went to them and said, "Hey, I have a new device, and we work on a contract basis.
Okay.
And they do the design to development testing, get the regulatory approval. They also are initially the contract manufacturer company.
Okay.
So
So they have so they'll do it at a good fee for you because they've
yeah,
got some back end hope.
well, it's fee for service, and then we reach a deal on when I order these for inventory. There's a fixed price that I pay them,
Yeah. Okay. Right.
and so it's the same thing every time. But there's a lot of contract manufacturing companies in Orange County and through the U.S. There's a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
competition
Yeah.
here. So it's not too difficult to find the skills required to make these products.
I never, I've driven around Orange County. I had no idea I was driving past how many? 38,000?
58,000 mid-device employees.
58,000 employed device employee. Uh, craziest product you've ever brought to market. Like the one you just
Oh,
thought, this just nuts. Can't believe it.
craziest.
Can't believe I'm doing this. Can't believe it's going to sell or I'll get a patent.
Well, I think the one, because I'd only done one orthopedic product, and that was for the hand surgeon. And so it was really interesting. I would have to go see a lot of hand surgery. It was called a tendon retriever. When your tendons are severed in your fingers or in your hand, they're like rubber bands. They kind of snap back, and he
Yeah.
needed a
Yeah.
way to grab them and pull them. So I had to see a lot of procedures where people had either almost cut off their fingers or had sliced their hand, and so just those were extremely gross to see them open that up. But we figured out a clever way to have a flexible device that could reach underneath tunnels and grab these tendons and pull them back and to hold them while he
Yeah.
would
What
reattach them.
reattach them.
Yeah, so that was just a lot of the things I do are for blind, or what they call endovascular procedures, where all you see is you poke the patients in the groin with a needle, and then everything you're essentially watching a TV screen for these
Yes.
procedures.
Yeah.
But the tendon retriever was gross open surgery that was brutal. And the worst story I had, I went in and a woman was there, and they had her on the table, and her hand was like, but it was splayed open. And
Okay.
evidently, she was partying a little bit too much and took out a samurai sword and like pulled it across her hand, and it literally her hand was just attached basically by the skin on the backside. So she had severed all those tendons, and he had to attach them all so she could operate her fingers. So those are memorable.
Be careful. Moral of the story: be very careful around samurai swords.
Yeah, well, and it seemed like every time I went down there to see his procedures, they were almost always alcohol related. We had another one where a gentleman was drinking beer, and he was holding a beer bottle and punched a cement wall. So it almost severed most of his fingers. So we had to reattach those tendons. So he said, yeah, a lot of these things he gets are alcohol related.
Boy, those are some tough images to get out of your head. I would imagine those.
Yeah, it's those are gross. Those are tough to look at.
Yeah, those are, and like I said, hard to get out. Um, Most beneficial. Like, is there one product that you brought to market that you felt was, the mass, kind of that mass, like you really did something powerful?
Yeah, that would be these, well, what they call endovascular aneurysm repair devices, or EVAR
Mm,
devices. So
okay.
up until the mid 1990s, if you had an abdominal aortic aneurysm, they would have to perform open surgery. General anesthesia, you lay on your back, they make a 5 or 6 inch incision basically from your belly button down, and push aside everything to
Yep.
view your aorta, because your aorta is close to your backbone. They would have to slice open the aneurysm, sew a new tube in there, and procedure worked well,
Whoa.
but literally 1% of the people die just going through that tough of a procedure. So a physician in the early 90s came up with an idea that, hey, just like arthroscopic knee surgery, we can maybe fix that just by going in with small catheters
Yeah.
of the groin. So my first startup company, we developed those products. So we developed aneurysm repair devices that were put in less invasively, both for the abdominal aorta and the thoracic aorta. So they're still used today. I mean, that technology is now 30 years old, and 80% of the aneurysms are repaired that way.
And with that device,
Well, with
or a similar device
others,
now.
yeah, there's competition. Yeah, several companies got into that. We were pretty early, but most of my patents that I've issued are for that type of technology. But I was fortunate. I've done a handful of those devices. I've probably been in about 1,000 of those procedures, and a third of the time I'm teaching the clinician how to use the device because it's a new device.
With all your medical doctor background.
Well, I can read, it's experience. I can read
It's,
CT scans. I can, once you develop the device, by the time it gets to the market, usually the developers are more knowledgeable than the clinicians.
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah, so they need to be trained. So I would do the training of the clinicians and the training of our clinical specialists. So those have been the most meaningful because those are life-saving and life-sustaining devices.
Yeah, that can change somebody's trajectory of how long they're going to live or the quality of life.
Yeah, absolutely. In this new procedure, you are, typically in the hospital one night, maybe two max. You have two small
Wow.
Band-Aids on your groin. You may miss work for a week, but then you're fine.
Versus having your stomach splayed open.
Usually 7 to 10 days in the hospital, 1 month off of work, and extremely painful.
Yeah, that's everything you do is going to hurt.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Afterwards. Yeah. And the very nice thing, that endovascular approach that we do, about 50% of the time, the patients are just sedated in a spinal block. So they're awake while it's happening. So there's lower risk of, there's a lot of complications if you do general anesthesia.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Every time you
every
go
time
down.
I go to a case that I say, okay, is the person awake or not? Because if they're awake, I'm not going to say certain things in the
Yeah,
OR.
you have to be
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to be really careful what you say if they actually can hear
Right.
you.
Yeah.
Well, theoretically, we can always hear. Even when we're out, we're recording something, at least in theory. What's next? I mean, you're more of a reactionary guy. You're not doing the super, or at least not. Maybe you've got some ideas in your head. But what's next? Where do you think? How much more innovation is there? And what do you see? What's the big problems yet to be solved?
Well, I think, again, the ideas never come from me.
Yeah,
They always come from physicians. They tell me what they need because I don't know clinically.
yeah.
And I think just two things that are really, really important for what's coming next is the imaging technology is so advanced now as far as MRI and CT of what they can see in the body. So just the detection and 3D reconstructions of everything in your body that they can do after these CT scans, that leads to better and earlier detection. And then I also think there's just been better technology development in miniaturizing everything. These scopes that we use or catheters that we use, we can make smaller holes in the body, and almost everything is going towards less invasive repair. There's fewer and fewer surgeries where they're slicing you open with a scalpel to fix you. There's more where, like knee repair, you can get your ACL fixed just with a scope. Whereas 30 years ago, they had to do this, 8-inch scar on top of your knee. And so that's just one example. But I think the combination of the improved imaging and then with the technology advancements of making things smaller, that's really leads to, I don't know what's next. I mean, I have a handful of things I'm working on,
Yeah.
all physician driven, but I'll wait until a doctor tells me what a problem is that we can solve.
The 3D imaging is really interesting to me because you could really start to see this. I mean, I could imagine you can see a tumor growing, or you can see
Oh,
a heart, maybe how many ways you can look at a heart with some of the new scanning.
yeah. Yeah. Everything is just so crystal clear now. So it's, and the only thing too, from those 3D images, they can create blood vessel models out of silicone based off a CT scan. So you can do really nice, what I want to say, practice or flow model testing
Yeah, yeah,
on actual anatomies, as opposed to, hey, we're just making a general anatomic model. But there's a show in Anaheim right now called MDM.
okay,
Gosh, there's probably several hundred exhibitors there. I was just there yesterday. So they have everything there, from all the machines. Anybody who makes any kind of supply or does anything for medical device manufacturing companies is there.
he's
So
there.
so every year I'm just amazed at the automation improvements
Yeah.
and the new vendors that are there with cooler hip technology.
I think my dad had a heart attack around 1974 or something like
Mhm.
that. And he was one of the first triple bypass
Mhm.
patients at University of Chicago. And still can remember that the surgeon had drawn a the best representation he could of my dad's heart and what he had done. And it was this colored, kind of a penciled colored drawing. And we had it framed and on the wall, kind of showing the Frankenstein heart that they had
Yeah.
made. And they pulled pulled the tube of his, they pulled his whole out of his whole left leg, they pulled the vein
Yeah.
to do the reconstruction. And so you're talking about this, you know, the until they zippered them open, they had no idea what they were going to find.
Yeah.
And then they get in there, and it's just they're doing it as they see it, right? They're doing it
Yeah.
live, and whatever they open up, they see, and then they go into the leg and grab what veins, and then he took an hour, must have taken at least an hour to draw this representation.
Yeah. Now they would do a CT scan and they would have a 3D image that they can put on a computer screen and spin it around.
And
And
spin it
even,
right.
yeah, I mean, and
The
the
Bitman.
3D imaging is just amazing. It just gives you basically a perfect anatomic view before the procedure. So you know exactly what devices you're going to need, what sizes
Yes.
you're going to need. So that really has been tremendous advancements that help.
Yeah, if they need a leg vein, they cut that first. They know what they need, and they only take what they need probably.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, suppose my dad, he had it all the way, from his ankle to his groin. It's just he had about, I don't know how many staples they put in his leg, but it was a lot.
Yeah,
Um,
from what I hear, that's what folks say. That's what's most painful. You have very little pain in your chest, but it's, even though you've got the big scar there, but
yeah,
everybody says the leg is more painful.
he was back in the day when they sawed open your chest and ripped. So I think his pain for a while was definitely his
Oh, okay.
chest, the bone. I think it was the bone and even the back. And I think, man, he was in some pain for a while. Um, let's grab you a question.
Oh no, no, I'm nervous.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's just, I'll try to. Let's hope for a good one. Oh, all right. Well, all I had to do was say the word hope. Do you have hope for the future?
Well, absolutely. And I think again, because of what I'm exposed to,
Yeah.
really the very clever ideas. In addition to the startup companies that I do, I get exposed to others when I go to meetings and hear
Oh,
about what other CEOs are working on. And
right.
I'm the member of a couple of CEO groups out here, and I participate almost in every single medical device meeting that they do after hours. There's a couple of organizations that meet every other month here in Orange County, and I go all the time just because I want to hear what other folks are doing. And
Of course.
there just
Yeah.
are some tremendous ideas with the advancement of AI and actually even 3D printing, where now they're 3D printing medical device implants to perfectly match your anatomy. And so some of the things are very clever. And again, I'm kind of cardiovascular focused, so
Yes. Yeah.
you go left or right of that, I don't know, but I just like seeing what's out there. And boy, yeah, it creates a lot of hope because a lot of stuff that used to harm us and shorten our
Yeah.
lifespan is now being addressed.
I was going to ask you about AI before, but I kind of paused, and so now that you mentioned it, how is it affecting the business, the industry in medical? I mean, it's going to
Um,
obviously have a lot of touch points,
yeah.
but maybe you can talk about a couple that you're seeing.
So two ways. First, it's personally affecting me, and during fundraising, if I'm presenting, we make widgets, we make devices, you
Yeah.
put them in a
Yeah.
box.
Yeah. 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 You make a widget.
If I'm in a pitch competition, or if I'm in front of groups that are considering different companies, the companies that say, "Hey, we have AI," they get 10 times the. So
Really?
they've ruined my life from a fundraising standpoint, because our devices do not have any AI. So
It's all human intelligence. Yeah.
yeah, but now one thing we do, the news product Single Pass, we just had a company from Australia create a QR code for Single Pass, and when you
Okay.
point any camera at it, phone camera or iPad camera, a 3D image of our device will come up that they can spin around and look at. But also, what's on there?
Oh,
There's a chat button. So if they go to that chat button, they can either verbally ask or type in any question they have about our device, and the the answer will come from AI.
the
So
AI bot. Yeah. The chat bot.
we've loaded over 400 questions in there, and so if they ask any question about our device, this it voices out the answer. So that's so our device doesn't use AI, but as far as information and
Yeah.
marketing,
Yeah.
that's a very clever thing. So just by having the QR code on our brochure, they don't have to call a sales rep, whatever. They can just open up the from the QR code and click on chat and say, hey, how hot does the tip of the probe get, or what
Right.
size what size guide needles can you use with this? Or again, there's over 400 questions in there, but that was through AI for taking all the documents they have were scanned, and so then the question list came out of that with all the correct answers. So that's kind of our first, let's say, dabble slightly into AI.
Yeah. What do you see? You spend a lot of times in smaller clinics. Are you in the larger hospitals as much, or
Oh yeah, yeah,
so you okay?
yeah. Because for the endovascular stuff, those are usually in the larger centers, and
Okay.
even for single pass with biopsy, the clinical study we did, they were in two large centers. So because mostly these things are volume driven, so I'm not in the remote areas at smaller clinics. The ideas can come from anywhere, but usually when we're doing procedures, it's for the most part in the larger clinics.
Yeah, I would imagine these, especially somebody like the guys that designed this or that came up with the idea of the single pass, high volume, repetitive
Yeah.
tasks,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of room for improvement.
Yeah,
Um,
and it's interesting. So learning about biopsy. So where we did our clinical study out here at Long Beach Memorial, I think they said they do about 150 biopsy procedures a month.
wow.
And then we have a friend down at MD Anderson Cancer Center in Texas. They do 2,000 biopsy procedures a month. So that's kind of the scale of
You start getting the scale of this, you start talking about, I don't know how many, a couple 100,000 around the country
there's 5 million biopsy procedures a year.
a year. Okay. I was going
Yeah,
to say like,
about
yeah,
about 3 million in the US, 2 million, elsewhere.
wow. And mostly what is the number one, what would be the number one reason you go for cancer? I would guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's suspected that you've got could be breast is probably the biggest biopsy market,
Biggest
but
one's got
then
to be breast, right? Yeah.
it's usually again kidney, liver, and lung. They suspect either you potentially have some disease and they want to get a tissue sample,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
for the most part, they suspect they see something on a scan, and so they want to go get a tissue sample. That most likely they suspect you have some type of cancer. That's the
Yeah.
biggest reason they're doing biopsies, and that's we are affected greatly and assisted greatly because of improved imaging. They find more of these suspicious masses, and so the very first thing you
Okay.
want to do is let's just make a small hole and get a tissue sample.
Yeah.
And just to make sure, we can either say, hey, don't worry, it's benign and you're cool, or hey, glad we caught this early. We've got to either remove it or we've got to give you chemo. So the the improved imaging is really driving our market growth.
Yeah, the breast cancer part, I mean, that's just peak anxiety for women.
Yeah.
Um, how small can you go with this device? Because I would imagine now with the enhanced imaging, you've got a lot smaller tumors you can detect
Yeah.
or
And really
growth mass.
so yeah, if they see a growth that's suspicious, and I don't know what they're terming as suspicious, but
Yeah.
the guide needle sizes are small. Um, and they have a balance. If you use a guide needle that's so tiny, you can't get a big enough tissue sample for accurate pathology.
Okay.
So they've got to make it a little bit larger so they can grab a little bit meatier sample. Then the pathologist is happy and say, okay, now I can do a lot more testing to clearly delineate, is this going to be a problem or not? So they do by gauge size. I mean, 18 gauge is, and I don't know what that is in millimeter or inches, but it's tiny. This is an 18 gauge guide needle. I don't think you can see the tip very much, but
Yeah.
this is what's used in 80% of the procedures that they reach through and grab a tissue
It's
sample.
pretty small.
Yeah, so it's small. So for
Yeah.
these procedures, you'll get sedated, and then they just give you local anesthesia. And I've seen them push these guide needles, 8 inches long into a person's back to reach their kidney, and in the room asking the patient, do you feel that? And they go, no, I don't feel it. It's okay. But it's because they're sedated and local
Yeah.
anesthesia,
Yeah.
but it's just scary to see
It's
them.
it's got to be a little surreal when you see a needle that deep go into somebody and they pull out a piece of their liver.
Yeah,
Um, it's
yeah,
fascinating. These guys are quite clever.
yeah. Well, yeah, it's the technology's been around for a while, but that's what's necessary. That's why a lot of these interventional radiologists, it's first thing they do in the day is 3, 4, 5, 6 biopsy procedures before they do the other stuff. So um, again, based on the center, if it's a cancer center, then the volume will be much higher,
Yeah.
like MD Anderson and
Yeah. Yeah.
Sloan Kettering and Cleveland Clinic. Those will be super high volumes.
The one thing I was wondering about the cameras. Excuse me. The cameras must be, where do they get these cameras now? Because they got to be tiny. And
Yeah, they have a lot of image. I don't do anything procedure wise that uses the cameras. So because when we're in blood vessels and there's blood there, if you put a camera in there, the lens is just covered
yeah,
with.
it's not going to work.
So, but yeah, I'm not sure how small they get, but those again, that's more technology advancement where they've been able to miniaturize those to go in,
Oh,
especially
that's right.
for things
Yeah.
more like orthopedic surgery. The cameras are a much bigger deal.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Depends on what you're trying to see. I would imagine.
Right.
What's happening at big hospitals? Maybe a kind of this human side
Mhm.
of stuff. What do you see happening at bigger hospitals? What's the change in the last couple of years after COVID?
I think what you've seen is probably staffs are more overworked and more stressed. Um, I also think too, I've seen from a business standpoint, one of the new bigger industries is now traveling nurses, where they're
Yes.
nurse on call, where before you worked at a hospital A, B, C, and that was it. And now I have a handful of friends that are very successful and make much more money by simply being on call as needed. And there's even a service out there where, hey, if you need a nurse of this type for these 2 hours, you can schedule, on our platform. So the online technology scheduling platforms have really helped us. But um,
Ah.
so that's really been an industry that's growing. And I have a lot of the friends that say, hey, I can set my schedule and tell them the days I'm available, and
Yes.
I can make just as much money working, 30 hours a week as I did when I had to work 50 hours a week.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Under different
But a
stress
lot of
levels
them
as
are,
well.
yeah, they're on call quite a bit if you do have a permanent job. So I just think COVID probably reduced the field of qualified players, and so they have to work longer hours, more days, so a little more stress.
The ones that have stayed.
That have stayed with the traditional. I'm only going to work at one place, um, 3 12-hour days or 4 10-hour days, that type of stuff. And then they'll also have to be on call.
And you're on call.
Yeah,
How
a
how about
certain
the
number of
doctor?
days per month.
Yeah. How about the doctors? What's happening with the doctors? Are they sticking around? Are some of them
Yeah,
looking for a way out? Because it's like you said, the landscape has changed in the hospital.
yeah, it's interesting. We get a lot of doctors that want to leave being medical practitioners to become chief medical officers and work for companies. So I think I see a trend where, hey, it sounds better to be in industry and again have, for the most part, set hours
Yes. Yeah.
as opposed to, working crazy hours at the hospital plus being on call. And I'm an interventional cardiologist I'm working with on another project. He was on call for 21 straight days. So he had to either answer the phone or go in for 21 straight days before he had a day off. So I think
Goodness.
for some of those folks, it's appealing to just go, hey, if I go to industry, it's mostly a Monday through Friday job. It's mostly
Yeah.
fixed hours. It's less stressful. So I think I see that trend. So also too, that the physicians don't make as much money as they once did.
I
With-
I was this is what I was gonna wonder is it and
Yeah.
how is that happening? Is it of what's the forces on that?
Reimbursement. So
What is reimbursement? Okay.
what Medicare and Medicaid have decided they will pay as far as how much they'll pay to cover certain
Right.
procedures and how much they'll allow for physician fees. That's there's pressure always to reduce that. So you can't make nearly as much money as you could before. So I have physicians tell me, look, I have to work like 50% more hours to make what I used to make 8 years ago.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, so there's been a dramatic change. Now they still make a lot of money, but it's just the heyday is over. So now it's just because of the reduced fees, you have to see a lot more patients, you have to do a lot more procedures, you have to work a lot more days to make the same money as before.
Can you are is the specialties helping still? Like, because that was at one point it seemed to be run for the specialty and the fees are there. You know,
That I don't know. I don't have the expertise to know.
yeah, it just seemed like the more, the more cutting edge, the more technical you were, the higher until everybody figures out, okay, we, start to narrow these fees down, and the technology comes into place. Um,
Right. Yeah. I think there's a lot of price pressure right now on new devices, on and again on procedure costs. So of course it's a big topic.
Young doctors, what do you see? You're in the room now with the new batches. You're not as old as me, but you got a couple of years on you.
Yeah.
We tend to older generations look at the younger generation sometimes a little cockeyed.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
it's a perpetual thing. It's a hazard. But what's your observations?
I think what I'm exposed to. You usually, I think the quality is the same, but I think from what I understand, fewer younger folks are coming in because it's more expensive to get through med school.
Yeah.
You more debt, and then
Yes.
you don't make as much money. So why even go there? I think some of the brighter students are electing different educational paths
Yeah.
as opposed to med school and popping out of there with that tremendous debt on the other side. So, but what I see, and again, since I'm using creating new devices,
Yeah.
most of the time we're not going in with the younger folks.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
already
Yeah.
we're already dealing with the more advanced clinicians. I've been in quite a few training sessions where it's been a resident that's being trained, but not so much. So I don't get exposed to the young guys that much.
Yeah. I'd be curious to see what that looks like. The new batches coming in.
Yeah,
um,
I mean, I think the quality is there, but just from what I understand, just fewer folks are applying.
yeah, and to see like I said, I agree. The quality is going to be the same. To get through is the same. The board exams are the same, and residency, I'm sure, is not any easier than it was,
Right.
20 years ago. Um, but what does that fervor look like? The motivation to get in. I wonder why are people motivated to become doctors now versus 20 years ago?
Yeah, that I don't have an idea.
Yeah.
I've just seen some very tough, when I say training sessions where I've been in where residents have been doing the procedures and the teaching physicians are really tough on them. It's not admirable. You have to have super thick skin because I've heard some things in the OR like, boy, I wouldn't want to go through this.
Okay. I guess that's it's a good transition to kind of a humanist, kind of a look on this from the quality of life that you see that doctors have. Now, I think part of you answered part of it by, the extra work that they have to do to make the same money. Um, are doctors generally happy? I mean, is this a career you end up flourishing in, or is it a rough go for most of them?
I think they flourish, but I also think too that I've seen quite a few, and a lot of the physicians that I work with, and in all the companies I'm doing right now, we have a bunch of physician investors. They're seeming to do something where they're balancing a little bit of business along with their clinical practices, where they are starting clinics or they are starting office-based labs, what they call OBLs,
Okay.
so that in addition to the clinical practice, they have other sources of income. And I think it's smart folks. You're not going to get
Yes.
what they are. So they've learned that there are business avenues that they can marry with the clinical performance
Hmm.
and maybe have a little bit better quality of life and maybe even eventually get out of medicine
And-
full time earlier because you've
yeah.
got these other business interests. So they do a lot of time serving as consultants for companies like the ones that I have. They do start their own side businesses. Some of them even leave because they do a startup and it gets funded, and they go, "Hey, I'm going to go be chief medical officer of this new company as opposed
Mhm.
to practicing medicine." So I think I see more of that. They're just exposed. You see Shark Tank and you see all these things, and
Yeah.
every single doctor that I know will tell me he's got a good idea that improves on something they're doing now. And it's, believe me, I keep threatening to teach a seminar on telling doctors if they pay me money to listen to the seminar, I guarantee I can save them money by not wasting their time filing a bunch of patents and doing things which then turns into nothing. But tempted to do it. I think eventually one of these days I'll have time and I'll do it.
How do, this just kind of gives me the greatest, like a visual. Um, you've been doing this so long. It's got to be rough when you're 7 minutes into a doctor's presentation to you, right? And you just already know, like, I just have to cut you off because this is going nowhere, or you don't have much chance. There's no hope.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can be pretty upfront with them, and but the calls come at all stages. So a call will come from the guy who said, "Hey, I'm thinking about filing a patent on an idea," to the guy who's already filed 10 or 12 patents and hired a company to make prototypes that's already spent $500,000 of their
Yes.
own money, and even the calls where this thing with these provisional patent applications, clinicians a lot of times don't understand it's an application with a 1-year deadline. That I'll get calls on day 360 because the physician just learned, hey, I have 5 days to decide if I'm going to file a full patent application, which is now $15 or $20,000. A year ago, I spent $1,500 to file a
Okay.
provisional application. I didn't realize that I had a year. So I get those desperation calls. What should I do? And I said, let it go. I mean, you're not going to spend $20,000 to file a patent application. It's maybe this provisional path is just too easy and too inexpensive. So many provisional applications get filed that shouldn't have been filed.
Yes.
But it's just doctors, they go to a cocktail party, they tell somebody they have an idea. Inevitably, somebody's going to know a patent attorney. Going to talk to the patent attorney, is going to go, let me file a provisional for you to protect that.
Yeah, it's a great idea. You got to protect it.
Absolutely. 99.9% of the time, they'll file a patent
Yeah.
provisional application. And then 90% of the time, that'll end up going nowhere
Yeah.
because they don't realize the burden that comes with that down the road.
That is, but that's still tough. I mean, at some point you are really telling people the hard truth. Probably rough. Like you said, 90% of your job is to say no.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they'll, and a lot of it you'll hear, well, I've never heard of this before, or I've never seen. I got, there still could be issued patents, that people didn't ever get to market. So you have to look at that. But also, where are you going to raise the money from? Can you make this at a cost that is bared by private insurance and
Okay.
Medicare? And what are the market dynamics? So there's so much that goes into that. I mean, there are a lot of good ideas that just don't have a market, or do have IP issues. You're going to infringe patents, or you can't get protection.
Hmm.
So much more goes into it than, hey, I think it's clever and I've never seen it before.
How about the
And
one that got away?
I don't think I have any of those.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I haven't heard anybody that's come to me. I have
Let's
a file of
let's come
just
back
start
and
seeing
gone
that.
na 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 na
Yeah.
na 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 na.
No, I
You
don't have
missed
any
it,
of
Bill.
it. I think I looked at over 200 ideas before I selected single pass.
Damn.
Yeah, you should see my folder of what was presented. But then I saw this and I said, yeah, this is a good one.
For the same solution, trying to solve the same problem.
No,
Okay,
different.
just 200 other
200
solving.
idea all over the
200
board.
other.
Yep.
Fascinating. I mean, you must meet some amazingly fascinating people
Oh
in
yeah.
those in
Yeah.
those 200.
Yeah. I mean, this industry, it's nice. I mean, you meet a lot of super smart people. I mean,
Yeah.
there's people like me times 1,000 where they've been dramatically more successful and started and sold several companies. So yeah, there's a lot of bright people in this industry.
And it's an admirable place to spend time and to invest your life's work, because you're really impact. I mean, the device, I mean, the single pass, that's immediately impactful to people.
Yes. Yeah. We start to forget that it's like plumbing, you're building something, or carpentry, you're building something. And I think one of the biggest impacts that was made on me, maybe it was 10 years ago, I was working on a new device, and it was an implant device for aneurysms. And I was in Germany doing the procedures, and the doctor told me, the gentleman receiving this implant later today, he's an engineer, and he wanted to meet the inventor of this device. He asked if he could meet you. And I had never met a patient before. I mean, usually
Oh,
I can't
really?
I can't go into the room until they're already under anesthesia or they're whatever. But this gentleman, wanted to meet the person who invented this device. So he spoke German, so there was a translator, but he just wanted
Okay.
to meet me and tell me he appreciated what he did and whatever. So I went and met him in his room, and then an hour later we were in the OR and fixing him. So that had an impact on him. That was a little more emotional.
One engineer to another.
Yeah. Well, or just, I mean, I don't get to chat with the patients,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
go in and they're covered, and I just, see the area that I'm dealing with and looking up at the screen, and, the procedure's over and I leave, and, I don't see them afterwards.
Yeah, yeah.
So they asked me if I was okay with that. And I said, yeah, I am. But that was special. And the fact that that was probably in 2011 or 2012. And I still remember that.
And interesting, because you're in Germany, everything's a little strange, right? It's all happening, and then next thing you know, you're talking to some German guy who you're about to do the procedure on.
Yeah. I felt a little more pressure, like, oh boy, this
Holy.
has but it went okay. It went
Thanks
great.
for fixing me. And
Yeah.
then
It had a great outcome.
things go sideways.
Yeah.
Oh,
But
that would have
it
been
was good. It was a good outcome. So I was happy.
that is interesting. What is the biggest device left, the one you brought to market that's been, that was maybe successful beyond your dreams, beyond your imagination, like that you got surprised. You look back and you're like, all right, we did that because it was a good money maker. It was a good business deal, but holy cow, it's way more successful.
Yeah, I'm probably still these aortic endovascular grafts, because this was new technology. And actually, I did my very first case in 1993 with basically a homemade device we made on the table, a surgeon and I. And then to design and develop, do a startup where we had very successful devices and sell that. But then seeing today that startup sold in 2005, that things aren't really that much dramatically better 15 years afterwards. I mean, the technology we developed then still holds up now.
On a
And just
on
knowing
a
that it's
kitchen
been used
table.
on, yeah, it's been used on thousands of folks. So it's the most impactful because, I mean, that is, if you have an aortic aneurysm and it ruptures, there's a 9 out of 10 chance you're gonna die.
Yeah,
So,
you're gonna be dead.
so knowing that we're fixing those, and for the most part, relatively painlessly, just by these endovascular procedures. So that's the biggest impact.
It's got to be fun looking back on some of those stories, right? Of how, and if people only knew, your life's about to be saved. Okay, with what device? How did this idea come
Yeah.
about?
An interesting thing now that's come into play that was never there before is, of course, the internet, because people, they're diagnosed, they're told what they're going to go through. You start getting a lot of phone calls from grandchildren or children because they've Googled and they want to talk to you about, hey, this is what was recommended. And so patients, think 50 years ago, the doctor told you needed to do this and you just went in and did it.
Yeah, okay.
Now everybody searches. Everybody starts searching. What are the devices? Which one are you going to use?
And do they find you?
We would get company phone calls saying, hey, somebody wants to talk to you because their dad is getting a procedure next week. So that's new. That's never happened before.
That is interesting, right? Because they can find you. Eventually, they'll find the pat. I mean, if somebody's really clever, they could actually probably ring your phone directly.
It always came through, what they'll do, the doctor will recommend, say, hey, this is the company I'm going to use. So they start calling the company.
Yeah.
So that's usually how they were, customer service would call me, go, hey, Bill, we've got this, daughter or granddaughter or son, and just wants to ask some questions. I'm like, oh, okay. Wonderful.
That is crazy, right? But kind of cute in a way. I kind of appreciate somebody like that really goes to that extent for a family member.
They're researching. They're trying to be thorough.
Yeah, you can't hate on that. All right.
No.
All right. A little more pressure, Bill.
All right.
We're into number 2. Yeah, it probably won't be any. I hope it's a little tougher than the last one. Okay. Ooh. So this is a good one as well. Are we hardwired to prejudge people?
Boy, that is a hard question, because I think we are not, but we learn through life to become that way.
Oh.
And I just think that, starting out as a child, you're not, but through your experiences, that you end up learning that unfortunate trait.
It is kind of a learned, yeah. It is interesting. I wonder if is it a human dynamic, or is it also something else that's at play there? Is it?
Well, a lot may have to do with your environment too.
Yeah.
I mean, where you grew up and what you experienced. I would think, because we're always reading people, sizing people up. I'm sure even when I'm presenting companies, people are trying to figure out if I know what I'm talking about, and is it legitimate, and or again, you're just sizing folks up, whether you're going to hire them or whether you're going to do business with them. But again, I think it's learned over time, and again, the environment. I grew up in a small town in upstate New York. I probably didn't have an ounce of that in me. My wife grew up in the hood in LA, and so she had to be a little more careful.
Yeah, you have to judge everybody you're walking down the street. You have to kind of make some sort of, is it a danger, friend or foe?
Right. So I think you're not born with it, but I think you learn that over time.
How about for your own, I think for you meet so many people, you get pitched so many times, and I'm sure doctors come in all shapes and sizes and flavors and presentation skills. And, the least presentable, the least articulate may also have the best idea. And how do you kind of hold back your own prejudgment in those scenarios where you're meeting with people?
I think for those types of things, again, it's the opportunity evaluation first of all.
Okay.
But then the thing now is I won't work with anyone that I don't like. So it's just, I'll pick who I work closely with because I mean they need to be a little bit fun. They need to be able to, be a little bit humble.
Yeah.
There's when you get with groups that are this intelligent, you can get some people that aren't really, so wonderful to work with. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
I intentionally avoid them now. If I don't think I can have fun working together,
Yeah.
because this stuff is hard and it's already stressful. So, again, I'm very, very set. And even some of the other guys I work with, we talk about it all the time. We don't care how good the idea is. If we don't like the person, we're not going to do a deal with them.
Wow. Well, and that's, you these are unbalanced, right? So it kind of comes back to that concept, right? If you're working with people who just don't have that balance, that aren't in the pursuit of flourishing in their own life,
Right.
because they're, they'll,
Right. If you're miserable in other aspects of your life and that shows through,
yes.
you try to avoid that. And even folks that I hire, gosh, I mean, very rarely do I look at like the degree and what your grades are and the technical experience. It's more on, are they happy in their own life? Are
Yeah.
they personable? Do they have friends and family that they depend on? That's more where my interview questions go than, tell me about your chemistry classes or
Yes.
tell me about the last device you designed. It's less of that. A lot of people are, when I say equally educated and equally talented as far as skill set, but they just need to be, a personality fit and a team fit. That's where we get our folks.
I love that. I'm a big fan of the team building and matching up people. I've seen that over and over and over again. The magic that can happen with good chemistry. With
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Is the chemistry.
Yeah, the chemistry that you create that's there, and you're a bit of the architect to that. You're the chef, if you will.
Well, I also recognize I'm very, very hands off. So people that work for me have to understand I'm not going to be bugging them every day, or I'm not
Yeah.
going to be leading. It's so there's a task. This is what I expect, and then I'm going to mostly stand back. So
Yeah.
I don't lean on people all the time. So I need to know that folks can handle that. I can't have folks that need direction every 15 minutes.
Yeah, and especially mentioned 7, you're sitting on 7 boards and how many pitches you're doing. Yeah, you need to hand things off and expect that it's going to be
Right.
uh, executed.
Right. Yeah. If the folks working for me can take stuff off my plate, that's great. They can't add stuff to my plate.
I had a little coaching session yesterday. I have a couple of interns that kind of on and off again, and at the end of every kind of what we're doing part is a little bit of kind of that coaching part about life and what's giving you trouble, and just kind of have a little dad talk. It's like a little dad time, and one yesterday was a young lady, and the conversation was about that. One of her questions about how to stand out and how to be seen, and she's starting a new job that she really likes, and it's talking about hustle. you know show up early, be the first one there, be the last one to leave, hustle from place to place, never say no, learn
Yeah.
how to learn how to say yes, and if you have to, but with obviously don't with parameters, so you don't say yes to everything and not be able to do it. But it was, I think in the end, it's that exact point, which is don't add stuff to people's plate, is a great one.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Growing up, I learned, I mean, it is just the way we grew up from the parenting is we always had to be on time.
I-
So, that has stuck with me forever. And everybody recognizes that with me. They know
yeah,
I'm going to be on time. And so I'll do everything early just to be on time. And then always do what you say you're going to do.
and always do what you
So
say you're going to do. It's a
because
great.
there's so many people that'll, okay, I'm going to go to that meeting tonight. And then you work during the day and you go, well, I'm kind of tired. I'm not, I signed up for it, but I'm not going to show.
I'm not going to go. Yeah.
And boy, if you look back at the missed opportunities from that, but so those are just the two biggest things. So, unless something really severe happens, always on time, always do
Yeah.
what I say I'm going to do. and then just try to pick people that you like to work with. So just
And find,
those
yeah.
3 simple things really get you a long way.
Bill, it's been an awesome conversation. Really, really
Thanks.
interesting. And I learned quite. I think I learned a little something. I say I learned quite a bit, but I'm gonna kind of spin it around in my head. Um, very, very fun chat. And how about
Thanks.
any closing thoughts? Anything you want to leave? You want to leave on the digital?
No, I mean, I think, thank you very much for having me as a guest. I hope someone learned something from this and finds it valuable that they took the time to listen, but just enjoy being on this and like what I'm doing right now, and super busy. And as long as I have the energy to do it, I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah, I want to ask you, how old are you?
On March 13th, I will turn 66 years old.
Wow. Okay, you look great. Yeah, you look
Okay.
great. Yeah, I'm 62. I'm feeling the age. Look at you, like you look like 66 young. I got to get some of that Orange County life in me.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for listening and supporting the Humanist podcast. We're in pursuit of flourishing. Lots of conversations like this with lots of different CEOs, and really, I think, like Bill, getting the perspective of what they do, how they got into the business, and I think Bill, you've just had a great career so far, in doing things, helping people, and making the world a little bit of a better place.
Thanks, Ken.
Really appreciate it. Thanks again, everybody. Bill, hang around for 10 seconds and I'll see you on the other side.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Welcome to the Humanist Podcast. I'm your host, Ken Stearns. Join us.